So Riccardo is a senior data engineer in AgileLab. Is a consulting and product company for light data engineering. But he's also a Dagster evangelist. So I said, okay, I want to check out this tool too. Let's bring Riccardo here. Thanks, Francesco. The evangelist part is Francesco part, so I'm not responsible for this. But I will put it on LinkedIn. Can you hear me as well? Okay, okay. I need to share. So, tonight we will talk about. Yeah, microphone. I don't like microphone. Tonight we will talk about data engineering with Dagster. Dagster is an open source data orchestrator framework developed by ex-founder of GraphQL and ex-contributor and founder of data analytics with Spark, Sadni Nikke, it's called. And also some ex-founder of Airflow. So let's talk about data orchestrator. What is data orchestrator? Data orchestrator in the modern data platform, data architecture are everywhere. So we have Airflow, we have Kestrel, Luigi, every step function, Kubeflow, Mage, Prefect, Luigi from Spotify. We have many data orchestrator, but we don't understand that data orchestration, it's a data pipeline, not just workflow orchestration. Because it's very important for data engineer, data scientist, or BI or stuff like this. It's very important for us to understand where the data is going on, what's happening on the data transformation, on DBT or on Spark, whatever you want. So it's fundamental to understand and to debug our pipeline, to understand what's in the data in this step. So when we go live with Airflow, this is what happened. This is what's going on. Yeah, it's happened. It's like 5-6 years that I'm working on this field before I do another job. And every time that I see the orchestrator with Airflow in production of our customer, this is what's going on. We don't have, for example, some customer doesn't have a development test and production environment for Airflow. They just have production because they doesn't know how to scale Airflow in different environment. They doesn't know how to make also a DAG, so they just copy and paste DAG in the same things. So after this experience, I started to evaluate other data orchestrator, evaluate other framework and libraries. And I found that Dagster like 2-3 years ago. It's a good choice for the stack that I love. So let's start from the theory of Dagster. So we don't do workflow orchestration, we do data orchestration. So our data pipeline, it's not a task pipeline. So we don't call the function, the step of our pipeline. We don't call it like get data, transform data, and stuff like this. We call the function in our pipeline as asset, as the data it is. So if we take the data from a database or a storage, we call this function, this asset, with the name of this data. So if it's the table of customer, it's customer. Nothing else, customer row. And after we start our data pipeline with our transformation. So we make a filter, we count the null, the distinct, stuff like this, and we call this asset with another name. This is the first step of Dagster. We change we are evolving the theory on the software engineering. We are using a new design pattern this, for understand how the data is moving, how the data is transformed. So asset and task on Dagster, which is the different, which is the pro advantage, disadvantage. So assets can be reused. So if I am developing an asset, for example, for getting customer data, everyone in the company, everyone on my team can reuse these assets to start another pipeline, to start another analytics and stuff like this. We can create data lineage, not data lineage as it's called, but asset lineage. So we can understand how the asset it evolves. We can have the metadata of the asset, so we can understand what's going on, how many records there is on our data, how many nulls, distinct, and stuff. We can also start to create data modeling to understand which are the dependencies of our data. So if the asset have a graph, this is the DAG, direct cyclic graph, the same definition Airflow, but Airflow when it started, it's not started in this way. It started with workflow orchestration. So the fundamental part of Dagster is the DAG definition for the evolution of the asset. So we can understand the lineage, the transformation of our asset by watching the DAG. Also, we can understand which is the data fraction, we can understand which are the partition, we can understand how many partitions have our asset, so we can schedule a job or an asset with other partition, with many partition, weekly partition, monthly partition. We can also debug our asset. We can test it like it's a simple Python test with which one framework you want to use. So this is the last step. We will go in depth in what is Dagster and how we can relate Airflow with Dagster in the code. So let's go on the code. So yes. Can you see? Okay, let's go. Okay, this is a production pipeline deployed, and it's 2 DAGs. What we are doing is to prepare the configuration. So we retrieve the configuration of our data. So we have many collection data, different domain, different tables, etc., etc. We read the configuration in YAML and JSON, and after we iterate in this configuration with the data pipeline. So this is the simple data pipeline: data ingestion, refinement, and serving. Simple. It's an Airflow. It's an Airflow, and we will see how to convert this DAG and integrate this DAG in Dagster, because Dagster doesn't have a limitation or restrict or constraint. Dagster it started with an open source framework. Now they have also a solution for cloud, but it's still an open source project. There is a discussion, you can contribute, you can work on this, no problem. So the data ingestion it's with a stack tech that we are using in AgileLab. There's an Iceberg with the Spark, with the glue catalog. So we make the glue ingestion with glue job on AWS. This is a serverless service. And we make the data refinement and transformation with Kubernetes on Airflow deployment with dbt and dbt Athena. And after we make the data serving in Delta Lake, another table format. This is very strange, but it's a use case very, very complex for our, because there is a different stakeholder, different data consumer, different data producer. There are many constraints that the customer put our, and so this is the result. But it's working. It doesn't have a problem. So Airflow gave you the possibility to migrate and integrate your DAG, your Airflow, every DAG that you have based on the simple library Dagster Airflow. So you just need to install in a virtual environment, Python, Conda, whatever you want, Portrait. You just need to install Dagster and Dagster Flow and install your Airflow dependencies. For me, it's like a good job, and so AWS, Kubernetes, stuff like this. So I installed, I imported Dagster Flow library. I set the path of the DAX, and the magic is happened because I can start our Dagster dev. And I have okay. Oh yeah, this one. So we have the data deal preparation. So with the task and the operator stuff, and the data lake stream, the DML. That is the data pipeline for data ingestion, data refinement with dbt, good job, iceberg stuff. So Dagster imported with a very simple implementation. They use the Airflow API to understand what you wrote on your DAG, what's in the database of Airflow, et cetera, et cetera. Regarding this, there are some custom integration that we can do for complex pipeline. For example, in our code in Dagster dev, we are doing 2 DAGs. We are now here, there are no scheduling, particular scheduling, partitioning, but in some cases, data engineer needs to partition and schedule the run of the data pipeline with this partition. So I want to run just the ingestion of the data of today, not the ingestion of the data of everything or the last week or stuff like this. So for ingestion the data of only one partition, we schedule and run the DAG only for today and only for this partition. In Dagster, it's very simple to implement, but in Airflow, you need to schedule, and it's a little bit complex. But the importer of the library that Dagster made, it's already compatible for this. So you must schedule the pipeline in Airflow, and after Dagster already understand which is the partition, which is the scheduled partition, and the policy for this one. So you can create also policy for this stuff. Another aspect of importing and integrating Airflow with Dagster is the database of Airflow. Airflow database have a memory cache, stuff like this. If you work in local, they have SQLite, or you can use Postgre, or you can use, I don't remember the other one. But it's fundamental for work with Airflow. In the local setup here, there is SQLite for me, but we can use also another kind of storage. Dagster, they have a storage for materialize the assets, and you can choose whatever you want. But also with Airflow, you can import the Airflow database with a simple migration of Airflow DB. So you can use Postgre, SQLite, or BigQuery, or Redshift, whatever you want. It's you can handle it with the configuration of Dagster deployment. Very simple. Another aspect, it's maybe we have a big enterprise. It can happen. And we have many teams, and we want to integrate your asset, your job, your data pipeline in Dagster in our team. And in my team, maybe I don't have a Dagster. I have a Airflow. So what's happened? We can call an asset from Dagster. Yeah, you can. So Dagster developed a solution to, by using the same code of this one, you can make the inverse production. So from Dagster, we can migrate it in Airflow. So very easy, very simple. So let's talk a little, let's get back to Dagster to understand how Dagster is deployed and how it works. So it's the concept of the Dagster, it's very simple. We have the asset, we have a job, and we have a repository. Before, a repository is called the location, but it's very similar as a name, okay? So the code location is your repository, Git repository, or whatever you want. So maybe I make this, my team has a data pipeline, another member of another data pipeline, et cetera, with different dependencies. So you DBT, mine have a Polar, so you have a Spark, et cetera, et cetera. So in Airflow, it's very difficult to manage environments. We already know. So what we do for handle environments, we do Spark job on Kubernetes, on Go job, or whatever we want. We just call order pipeline. So most of the data engineering that I know, they use Airflow as just a scheduler that calls stuff. It doesn't integrate with the data in the code. So in Airflow, we can create different repositories that are not connected between there and with different dependencies. The only things that Dagster wants is a Dagster web server and Dagster daemons and the gRPC protocol. This gRPC protocol can be used to communicate with the deployment of your code repository, So you can start a data pipeline with Dagster in my Git, in another server or AMR or AKS or whatever you want, and without conflict on dependencies. Every repository has different dependencies. So we don't have the restriction. We can also ingest and submit a Dagster pipeline in a Spark job. So we, for example, as a data engineer, most of my work is Spark. So I just submit this job in Spark with Dagster. And I can handle all the dependencies, the lineage, the asset, and trouble what happened. Very simple, very easy. And for me to understand how the code is changed, it's very important. And also how the data is changing. So I don't know if I have other time. Okay. Okay. Good. This is a simple asset definition. This is a simple Dagster definition of a data pipeline, for example. So an asset, as I said, it's a table, it's a data, it's also a Python model, a machine learning model, for example. We can use an asset as a machine learning, so we can ingest the data, take the data, filter the data, feature engineering. We can train the model by using the asset. It's very important for machine learning. I'm a data scientist, and I use Dagster because it's a way to trouble and understand what's going on the data. The second important things as a data scientist or data engineer is metadata. Airflow can integrate metadata and metrics with OpenTelemetry, for example, or other framework, external framework. Dagster already have this kind of stuff included. I'm not saying that you must use this one as lineage or metrics framework for your company. So Dagster provide this kind of metadata for trouble, for understand what's going on your data pipeline. But Dagster, it's not forcing you to use it as metrics, but you can use also this one. So this is a simple asset in a group defined in Python. We define also the metadata, for example, the number of rows. This is another asset that takes as dependencies the asset before. As you see, you can understand very easily how Dagster define the declaration. We use the decorator as a documentation for our data pipeline, so we can understand easily how it works. Now here I just use DuckDB with some query with the New York Taxi dataset, and we can also implement the asset check. This is an asset check that can control and validate what's the output of asset, what's the input of the asset. And we can also set alert, and we can also set policy for the validation. So there is also a threshold that we can set. We can also integrate a great expectation, Pandera, PyDownting for this stuff, but asset check is very useful because in the UI we can show this. So let's start our UI. Yeah. So let's see to the global lineage. You have this stuff. Let's materialize. So we can materialize all commit, and we can see how the pipelines work. This is the out, this is the error, the records. We can also see now that they are materialized. We can also see the plots. For example, we can create a plot with pandas or other plot framework where we can see the records, we can see metadata and stuff like this. The definition. Let's take also another use case for partition, for example. Here we have defined all the assets, job, stuff like this. And let's take the partition. For example, reload, track strip file. As you see, you can see all the partition defined. Let's see on the code what is this partition stuff. So we have monthly partition in this case. We define the start date and the date, and we use this constant. Where is it? Okay, this one. And we can integrate it with partition. We can also make a backfilling with partition. So we can also get back to the version of a materialized version of the asset and understand what happened on this step of our data pipeline yesterday or the last week, for example. Let's materialize only, for example, this one. Let's take from this. Partition selection, lattice, lattice, for example. No report, sorry. No, because I don't see stuff. Ecco. This one, I can select the partition and materialize this. So they started and they just execute the asset only for this partition. That's good.
Do you have questions for Riccardo?
Thanks, Riccardo. So I would like to know, or will you deploy Dagster in production actually? So like Airflow, for example, recommended approach is to use Kubernetes executor. What does it look like a deployment of Dagster in production? Like which type of orchestration will you use? I don't know.
I deployed Dagster in two ways. One is in Docker Compose, one is in Kubernetes. One is on AKS, one AKS, and one other is on premises. So two situations different, cloud agnostic and stuff like this. So the first project, the first time that I figured out Dagster is like 2-3 years ago. So when I deployed this on Docker Compose, there are some issue with the params and stuff like this. But we just figured out with on Slack there is a service provided by Dagster team, so there is a time zone where you can ask question directly to the customer service or assistant of the Dagster, and they can answer you question. But we just ask to the community, and they give you some helps to deploy it in Docker Compose. It was very early for this open source project 3 years ago. But now it's more structured. Most of the issue that I have when I deployed on Docker Compose was figured out. On Kubernetes, the same situation. So maybe you have something to fix for the parameters for pass. For example, if you have a complex data pipeline that are also they put secret. For example, it's most important for our customer. It's the secret. You must to handle the secret password. It's very important. So for this kind of activity, maybe you can ask to the Dagster team some assistance. They answer you very easily in 5 minutes. But I don't find some issue very particular.
Thanks.
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering how do you have an example of how this works together with DBT?
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, because you define the assets in the script, and in DBT you define the tables as ref functions or the models. I'm wondering how that would work together.
In local, I don't have an example, but we can see easily on Dagster. Dagster, when it started as an open source project, they started with DBT. So they make a partnership with DBT and they started to work, and it's perfect for DBT. But my use case, when I deployed it on the customer, they doesn't have DBT, so I don't use it. But the integration with DBT is very, very, very common used. Most of the DBT team using Dagster. You can define, for example, if I go back to the source asset, for example, this is an asset that it's a function, a Python function, okay? And for example, in our case, we need to take table from or CSV or data storage from many locations different. And sometimes it's just a CSV in a storage. So what we do is create source asset, and DBT is doing the same thing. So you can define source asset that are asset that the input-output manager of Dagster handle. So the input-output manager have a ready integration with the Spark, DBT, Polars, Delta Lake, many stuff. So they are already integrated. So you just need to define your source asset, for example, like very easy, like source asset, like this. DB or domain, like, and table, sorry, like customers, and they define the key. So the key, it's the asset key. The asset key is for this Python function is taxi trips file, but for a source asset, you must to define your key as key name on your Dagster deployment. So for example, customers table, and it's done. The IO manager they make the magic and they take it. The same situation can be done with Spark, Polar stuff like this. For example, in the first customer and first deployment of Dagster, I have a different source file and destination file. I want to create an IO manager that is an interface for all the developers, all the data engineers and data scientists. So I create an IO manager that handle Spark, Pandas, CSV, InFitP, many different sources, and handle everything from an IO manager. IO manager is just an interface in Dagster, and you just need to define what is an input, what is the output of your, how you write an asset, how you read an asset, and it's done. Finished.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can I ask? I saw when you were showing the example of the Dagster code, you were, for example, querying an API. It means that the computation is happening inside Dagster, right?
Most of also DuckDB transformation. This one is made on Dagster, but we can deploy it on.
What
wherever we
about
want.
when you have some heavy computation happening? Do you run like a Docker container somewhere else, or this is still inside Dagster? And how you do that? Is still that an asset or?
Yeah, you define on the data pipeline. Very easy. So you want to take, for example, this request or a Spark job that is very heavy to do in your local machine or your on-premises servers. So what you do is define your data pipeline. So request, etc. So EV job, and what is it? Okay, here there is the definition of your repository, as I said before. So here you can define the asset, the jobs, the resources. For example, here we can say the Docker configuration for the deployment and for the running. Whereas what I saying before to Nicola, it's for the Docker deployment or Kubernetes deployment. Here we define the Docker run. So we are doing a Docker run with assets, configuration, and stuff like this. And we define the Docker run as job and schedule it. So we can rate this one as job. We take the assets and we make jobs. That's just a list of jobs. We put job and it will deploy it. Also, then we can put also the scheduling, and we can put this stuff on an external distributed system, and also with the gRPC protocol, we can retrieve the metadata and see the result here. If you make a question, there is a sticker. I forgot it.
So Airflow has a very big provider library for third-party integrations, right? You showed Kubernetes operator, right? If you want to spin a job on Kubernetes and like AWS and all kinds of stuff, so that you don't have to write everything in like Python code. Is something like that for Dagster as well?
Yeah.
Or no?
The Dagster, most of the integration that Dagster is doing, they are doing by the Dagster team. Airflow, as I said, there are, for example, the Kubernetes or glue operator, it's not maintained more. So the glue job maintained, the glue job operator that I showed you before, it's not more maintained so much. Most of the operator that we are using in our customer, it's not so much maintained. Only Kubernetes and Docker operator is maintained by Airflow. And or S3 hook, like this stuff. So most of the time for Airflow, we create custom operator. In Dagster, there is the inverse stuff. So the team of Dagster take time for define, integrate external vendor, external provider, external library with Dagster. For example, in the last release, there is a Dagster pipe. Dagster pipe, it's a data integration where you can, for example, load data pipeline or data on external services like Databricks or Spark or stuff like this. So you can integrate it with external data integrator like Arbite or Fivetran, Databricks, stuff like this. We have in the last few months, DuckDB is going to the hype. So there are DuckDB everywhere in data engineering, and so we bring it also in Airflow. But when it started with dbt. dbt is the most integration for the mainly integration that they made for Dagster. It's also started with Spark, and now it's going on with Delta Lake, but there are many integrations for this one.
Are they versioned separately from Dagster, or are they tied to a Dagster version?
they are inside, so you can check it on the documentation of Dagster. It's maintained by Dagster. It's supported by Dagster, but also there are support from DBT that is Chorus or stuff like this, and the AWS service they provide also integration and maintaining, but mostly of the libraries and package integration are maintained by Dagster. You know. But
Thanks.
Yeah, it was online. So yeah, I want to know if you can generate asset dynamically. I give you an example. For example, in Airflow, you can parse the catalog JSON of DBT and then generating your DAG. Because if something fail, you start from failure from specific node in the task. Can you do something similar in Dagster, like creating an asset dynamically from whatever I decide, a YAML file or whatever? So
this,
that
yeah, this is can be happen, can be done. This is an example. This DAG generated dynamically another DAG because I have a different collection, different database, different table to ingest, ingestion to the data lake. So what we do is to create a trigger that launches this data pipeline with a dynamic map tasking in Airflow. This can be done very easily also in Dagster, but also it was migrated by easily from this one, but it also can be done automatically. For example, Dagster, they have the YAML implementation, so you can create and define the asset dynamically with YAML configuration. I don't know JSON, but YAML, sure. And also you can generate the graph assets. So the graph assets is the library that manage the asset dependency. So you can use this graph library to generate dynamically the asset.
that's why I ask, like, if you are able to have a JSON and transforming a YAML and yeah. Thanks.
Okay, this is question regarding the DBT integration. And in the DBT integration, is it running models one by one, or the Dagster, is it running the models one by one? Because that would take a lot of time, right? DBT takes it. There is a lot more overhead when we run models individually and try to run them in parallel.
You mean if I run the DBT model in a distributed system like...
Exactly. Let's say if I run DBT, run all my models, set parallelism to 20, and it would fire 20 queries to the Snowflake database. But here, what it will do is, it will do DBT, run one model A, run one model B, and so on and so forth. And that might add some, how do you say, that would add complexity.
Yeah, for example, here I run this DBT run model that have dependencies, and they run it on Kubernetes operator in Airflow, for example. They run it on a Kubernetes operator because we want to use it and scale this one, okay?
Okay, it's running all the models then, not
They
just one.
they run all the models.
Okay.
So we have different model. Yeah.
But then the DBT individual model is not an asset, right? The whole collection of. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So if you want to create a dependencies also in Dagster, you can do it. But if your model already have a dependency, so just use it.